platforms. Good evening, folks. You are watching, of course, James Kuzo here on the live call-in show. Yes, live chat with James. Don't forget that if you want to call in and discuss the topic of tonight's show or any other, please feel free. 1-604-385-5093. As we start off the show tonight, we're going to explore the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the volatile state of the Republic of the United States of America. Right now, it appears that the U.S. is essentially a big tinderbox. A lot of divisiveness, a lot of polarization, and a lot of anger. A lot of it misdirected. And unfortunately, it is having a direct effect on everyday lives of Americans. It is also spilling out into the global community as well. Now, let's start with taking a look. Of course, there are a lot of different conspiracy theories that are circulating over the death of Charlie Kirk. He was the founder of Turning Point USA and had a lot to say on a lot of very controversial subjects. Now, I may not agree with things that he said. I may not agree with his opinions or a lot of other things when it came to Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. What I definitely was a supporter of is his right to free speech. I was a supporter of Charlie Kirk's ability to go out and speak his mind, to share his opinions, and to voice what he wanted to share with others. Again, I may not have agreed with him. I may not have had a lot of the same values or ethical considerations. But again, I did support his right to free speech and freedom of expression. For that, it is a sad day when any person, whether it's in the US or elsewhere, is silenced for sharing their voice, for sharing their opinions, no matter how much they may differ from our own. Every person has the right to be safe and secure, regardless as to what they say. Let's face it, I get a lot of hatred towards some of the reports that I do. I get emails swearing and aggressive and other things. When I was reporting on the war in Ukraine, I had a major influx of followers on TikTok from Moscow. When I talk about human rights in India and the human rights abuses at the hands of the BJP government, my followers and monitoring from New Delhi goes up. It's not a coincidence. It is a simple fact of journalism and of being an online individual. These reports that people get that they don't agree with, it's simple to just keep scrolling. It's simple to turn the news channel or the television channel. It is simple to block accounts that you don't want to get information from. It's easy to do that. There is absolutely no reason in a modern day society that anybody should be targeted for what they believe, what they say, what they share. Instead, it should be an open dialogue to debate both sides of an issue. It should be the right of every individual, whether it's talk show hosts on late night, to different news organizations, or a blogger or a YouTuber. The point being is that everybody should be safe from threat. They should be safe from threat from others, from the opposite side of the opinion, from special interest groups, and of course, by special consideration, they should be safe from any political activity or politician. Plain and simple. Freedom of speech and freedom of expression is not something that should be applied disproportionately or unequally. It is something that is treasured, something that people have given their lives to protect that right and that freedom. and it is something that each and every one of us should value. And when it comes under threat, people should stand up and have a voice. Whether it's at the election office and the polling stations, whether it's through email and telephone calls to politicians to tell them that any type of suppression of freedom of speech is unacceptable. That is the true reality of life. Unless that speech is directly targeting individuals with violence or trying to incite violence or hatred, then it should be respected. Now let's take a look at this shot that was heard across the divided nation. It was late afternoon as the sun cast along shadows across the campus of Utah Valley University as Charlie Kirk, the conservative firebrand, of course, and founder of Turning Point USA, took his seat. It was September the 10th, 2025, the opening event of his American Comeback Tour. The setting was his signature stage, not a formal lecture hall, but an open-air tent. And of course, it was in a busy campus hub. A simple table. Before him bearing the provocative invitation, "Prove me wrong." Something that we've seen as it launched him from his earlier days to his final. It was a scene that had played out dozens of college campuses, a blend of political rally, public debate, and let's not deny that it was some performance art that had made the 31-year-old one of the most influential and controversial figures in American politics. Like it or not, he truly was a force. And then a single shot rang out. Graphic footage, which spread across social media with terrifying speed. It captured the moment that Kirk was struck in the neck. The ensuing chaos, the screams, the rush of security, the immediate and irreversible finality of that act was broadcast live into the digital bloodstream of a nation already racked with political fear. Kirk was pronounced dead at a local hospital, his life ending in the same arena of public confrontation where he had built that very career. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom of shock, grief, and recrimination. President Trump, a close ally and mentor, expressed his grief and anger at the heinous assassination, calling Kirk a friend who was loved and admired by all, especially him. To his millions of followers, Kirk was a charismatic truth teller, a courageous warrior, fighting for conservative values in the hostile territory of academia and mainstream culture. To his millions of detractors, however, he was a purveyor of hate, misogyny, and dangerous conspiracy theories, a man who had built a movement by deliberately stoking the very flames of division and animosity that ultimately consumed him. Again, I was not a Charlie Kirk fan, but I was a fan of free speech, and I still am. And his right to that should never have been taken from him. Now, Kirk's assassination is a critical inflection point in an era of escalating political violence that has seen assassination attempts or alleged assassination attempts on a president, the murder of state lawmakers, and a documented spike in partisan attacks. His death, far from being a random act of madness, is a profound and tragic symptom of one of the political environments that he helped to create. The battle to define his legacy and weaponize his death is not just a political skirmish. It is a case study in the manipulation of tragedy in the post-truth America, raising the fundamental questions of whether his killing was an isolated incident or a terrifying omen for a republic standing on the edge of a precipice. It was the making of a mega prophet. From the garage to the White House steps, it was a journey that he had taken. The story of Turning Point USA begins not in a Washington, D.C. boardroom, but in the suburban Chicago garage of an 18-year-old Charlie Kirk in 2012. Fresh off a rejection from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, Kirk channeled his political ambitions into a new venture. With seed money and guidance from Bill Montgomery, an ultra-conservative Tea Party activist who convinced him to forego college, Kirk founded Turning Point USA with a stated mission. That mission was to identify, educate, train, and organize students to promote the principles of freedom, free markets, and limited government. In his early years, the Turning Point USA reflected the dominant themes of the post-Obama Tea Party movement. Kirk focused on what he saw as a leftist propaganda in academia, creating a professor watch list to expose academics who allegedly discriminated against conservative students. He needled his peers for criticizing capitalism while enjoying the fruits of that very thing, such as Starbucks and Netflix. The organization was one of many conservative youth groups vying for influence and donor funding. The turning point for Kirk and his organization was the rise of Donald Trump. Despite initial misgivings about the candidate, Kirk pivoted to become one of Trump's most enthusiastic backers after the 2016 Republican nomination. He served as a personal aide to Donald Trump Jr., and that was during that campaign, a role that granted him unparalleled access to the center of the new conservative universe. This alliance was transformative, with the backing of the Trump family and an influential set of conservative financiers. Turning Point USA's fortunes skyrocketed. It evolved from a niche campus activist group into what the New York Times would call the nation's preeminent conservative youth movement organization. A central pillar of the Make America Great Again campaign. It was a playbook for a new generation. Kirk's genius was not in the originality of his ideas, but in the revolutionary way he packaged and sold them to a new generation. He understood that for an audience raised on social media, the medium and the aesthetic were inseparable from the message. He replaced the staid, intellectual conservatism of the past with a high energy, influencer-driven, and confrontational style perfectly calibrated for this digital age. His core strategy was direct. Combative engagement on college campuses. The Prove Me Wrong tours became his trademark. By setting up a single table in the middle of a campus and inviting debate, he created a spectacle. These events were designed to generate viral moments, short, shareable video clips of him sparring with, and often mocking liberal students. This format made him appear accessible and fearless, a warrior taking the fight directly to the enemy. While some observers saw this as a refreshing form of open dialogue, it was also a content generation machine that made him a star. Tragically, this very openness also made him a uniquely vulnerable target. Complementing the grassroots campaign tours were Turning Point USA's large-scale national events. These were not dry, traditional political conferences. Events like the America Fest and the annual Student Action Summit were slickly produced extravaganzas that drew tens of thousands of young people. They featured top conservative speakers, including President Trump himself, on a glitzy stage with massive screens, pyrotechnics, and lighting shows befitting a stadium concert. By blending celebrity appearances, country music acts, and festival-like atmospheres, Kirk transformed political organization into a desirable cultural experience. He was not just building a political movement, he was creating a lifestyle brand. The message itself was a potent cocktail of self-help and political grievance, particularly appealing to young men who felt alienated by mainstream culture. On his popular podcast, Kirk offered tough love advice that could have come from any motivational speaker. Get out of the gaming chair, get a job, and get yourself together so you can date. He addressed issues like male depression and youth suicide epidemic with surprising degree of empathy. The personal advice was seamlessly interwoven with a political narrative that cast his followers as victims of a woke culture that viewed them as irredeemable, inconvenient obstacles. He offered them an inspiration, a purpose-filled mission, rooted in faith, family, and rejection of victimhood, even as he framed their cultural grievances in terms of victimization. The successful model is now being scaled and pushed deeper into the American education system in a strategic move to engage students. Even earlier, TP USA established over 1,000 chapters in K-12 schools. In the wake of his death, the expansion has accelerated dramatically, with the organization reporting tens of thousands of new inquiries and receiving pledges of support from Republican leaders and even the U.S. Department of Education, which has partnered with TPUSA to develop educational programming. Quite ironic, as Trump wants to shut down the Federal Department of Education. The ideology of a cultural warrior is what we are looking at. The ideological journey of Charlie Kirk and TPUSA is a map of modern conservative movement's own transformation. The initial focus on free markets and limited government was a product of the Tea Party era, which the organization was born. However, to remain relevant and grow in the age of Trump, Kirk had to pivot. He astutely followed the energy and the funding within the conservative ecosystem, which had shifted decisively from debates over fiscal policy to the more visceral backgrounds of the cultural wars. The pivot was deliberate and strategic. His rhetoric became increasingly focused on inflaming cultural tensions around race, gender, and immigration. The organization that once advocated for a secular worldview and a separation of church and state became a bastion of Christian nationalism. Kirk himself began to frame American politics as an apocalyptic spiritual battle, arguing that you cannot have liberty if you don't have a Christian population, and leading crowds into chants of Christ is King. This was not just a personal evolution. It was a calculated business decision to align his brand with the most energized and powerful faction of the new Republican base. As part of this shift, Kirk fully embraced the conspiratorial fringe of the MAGA movement. He became a prominent promoter of the Great Replacement and the white genocide conspiracy theories, which posit that while Americans are being deliberately replaced by non-white immigrants. He amplified Donald Trump's false claims of widespread fraud in the 2020 presidential election and spread misinformation about the pandemic. This alignment cemented his status as a key figure in the MAGA universe. But it also placed him firmly on the far right, trafficking in ideas that hate speech monitoring groups described as divisive and racist. It became a legacy of division, an architect of outrage. To understand why Charlie Kirk's death became an immediate national flashpoint, one must understand the deliberately polarizing nature of his personal persona. His strategy was not to persuade the middle, but to energize the base by making provocative claims and publicly inciting outrage. These were not occasional gaffes. They were the central feature of his brand. His inflammatory statements served as a specific political function. They acted as a loyalty test. By saying things that were unacceptable in mainstream discourse, he forced his audience and the broader public to choose a side. The inevitable backlash from the media and the left served only to validate his narrative that conservatives were a persecuted class, which in turn bonded his followers to him and a shared sense of defiance. The outrage he generated was the fuel for his movement. His own words provide the clearest evidence of this strategy. Across a range of social issues, his rhetoric was constantly inflammatory, often targeting marginalized groups and promoting a worldview of cultural warfare. Let's take a look at a few of his controversial statements. And sorry, folks, I'm just going to double check because I've got two streams going. So I just wanted to make sure that I've got that open in case anybody wants to comment. Feel free. Also, keep in mind, folks, that the phone lines are open, 1-604-385-5093. Now, let's go back to these inflammatory comments that he has made. In January 2024, he stated on January 23rd that if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. In 2021, he called George Floyd, a black man murdered by a police officer, a scumbag. He claimed that May 19th, 2023, he claimed that prowling blacks go around for fun to target white people. He said that was a fact when it's not. He actively promoted the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, a cornerstone of course, the white nationalist ideology. And he said that various times. In terms of gender, in response to Taylor Swift's engagement, he advised, submit to your husband, Taylor, you're not in charge. That was on August the 26th, 2025. At various points throughout his speeches and his events at Turning Point USA's Young Women's Leadership Summit, he and other speakers advocated for women to marry young and prioritize being a homemaker over pursuing careers. Now his widow is leading the Turning Point USA as an executive. Seems to be against what he was going for. Now, the LGBTQ plus community, on April the 1st, 2024, he called for a Nuremberg-style trial for every gender-affirming clinical doctor. Not very open, I'll tell you that. When it came to religion on September the 8th, 2025, he posted on social media, Islam is the sword the left is using to slit the throats of America. On July the 6th, 2022, he argued there is no separation of church and state. It's a fabrication. It's a fiction. It's not in the Constitution, he said. On April the 5th, 2023, he stated that it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. And let's remember that gun possession or the right to bear arms is not God-given. That's given by a constitution, not by God. Now let's take a look at the Trump symbiosis. The relationship between Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump was a textbook example of political symbiosis, a mutually beneficial alliance that elevated both parties. For Trump, Kirk delivered a demographic that the Republican Party had long struggled to capture, young people. Meanwhile, Turning Point USA became a powerful and energetic youth army for the MAGA movement, providing volunteers, enthusiastic crowds, and a constant stream of pro-Trump content online. For Kirk, Trump provided the ultimate validation, mainstream legitimacy, a massive media platform, and direct access to the Oval Office. This was more than a simple endorsement. It was a deep operational partnership. Turning Point USA's political action arm, Turning Point Action, functioned as a de facto wing of the Trump campaign. Its Chase the Vote initiative spent millions of dollars in key battleground states like Arizona to identify and turn out low propensity right-wing voters. Disaffected conservatives who might support Trump were unlikely to vote without a direct push. This ground game operation was credited with helping deliver crucial votes for Trump in the 2024 election. This demonstrates that Turning Point USA was not merely a campus debate club, but a sophisticated and well-funded political machine. The relationship can be seen as successful franchising of the MAGA brand. Trump provided the core product, a potent mix of populist nationalism and cultural grievance, and operators like Kirk became highly effective franchisees. They took the core message and customized it for a specific market segment. In this case, it was the American youth. Kirk built his own profitable